And thank you, Minister Moynihan and Minister McEntee, for all that you're doing to try and move the dial with disability matters and with children with additional needs. 51 recommendations have come out of the review of the EPSN Act 2004, which 2 decades ago ambitiously set out to ensure equal access to an education system that would recognise the potential and rights of our children with additional needs. We have to acknowledge that many improvements have been made in those 2 decades in relation to the increase of SNAs and positive changes in the way that SNAs are allocated, as well as other resources. We also have to acknowledge the increase in special education teaching hours and an increase in special classes from only 400 in 2010 to 3,400 in 2024. I also acknowledge, and I really look forward to the rollout of a return of therapists like speech and language therapists, occupational therapists and behaviour support specialists to schools, but now not as HSE staff, but as staff of the Department of Education. And I believe we're starting with 90 therapists in 45 schools. And I hope that these therapists are rolled out in a really meaningful way, where they're actively within classrooms, for a period of a day, rather than just set aside one-to-one therapies, because they can really help in relation to what's happening at circle time, what's happening at PE time, at academic time, by looking at the whole classroom approach rather than just in one-to-one sessions. We also have to look at the fact that, sections 3 to 12 were not commenced within the Act, which would have seen a legal requirement for IEPs. I do, as a behaviour consultant who worked in the area for 19 years, understand why we now need this shift to student support plans that are responsive and dynamic rather than prescriptive and inflexible. And over the past 2 decades, we have seen some schools excellently carry out IEPs, where other schools, sometimes they have just been a tick-the-box exercise. IEPs, when handed over from one teacher to another or one school to another, can be a really good roadmap in what the student achieved, or sometimes it's just not reflective of what was actually happening on the ground and it was just a nice document. So we must ensure that the student support plans are child-centred rather than bureaucratically centred. All of our children deserve a positive learning experience when they go to school, and an experience where they get to realise their full potential. And I want to look at some of the recommendations. So we look at an inclusive environment for our children, and what does that really mean? It means that they're able to flexibly move between settings. I know that Killeen National School outside Louisburg do this really, really well. They're a small rural school, and one of the kiddos that I worked with from the get-go when he joined that special class, he was included in art, he was included in lunchtime, he was included in PE, and the curriculum may have had to be completely adapted for him, but he stayed with his peers all the way up and graduated out of that school this year. And what it means then is that, they get invited to birthday parties, they're played with at lunchtime. So inclusive must mean that it must mean included. It doesn't just mean beside the school or in the same school. It's interwoven throughout all the activities. We also need to look at the changes to ratio for approving new special classrooms or autism classrooms. I know the ratio was reduced from 8 teachers to 6 teachers, but when you look at rural schools, there's some schools in my constituency in Mayo that will never reach 6 teachers. I think of Mount Pleasant National School, where they have already identified 3 children who would love to stay in their school, love to stay with their siblings, avoid long bus journeys. And by being in that school, as I said, they might get then invited to the local birthday parties, and they're part of their community. And I do want to thank Minister McEntee, who was working with me on this, and we hope that maybe in 26 we might be able to open a classroom there in a flexible way without the need for reaching 6 teachers. We also need to look at the language, and I'm really glad that this was highlighted in the review. We absolutely need to move away from that health view that we were looking at diagnosis in the past, and into access and inclusion. And with that, absolutely do away with language like units and sticking with classrooms. They're not units, they're not clinical settings, they're learning environments and they're classrooms. We have to move away from autism spectrum disorder to person-centred child-centred language. You don't have autism, you are autistic, and you're proud to be autistic and have a different neurotype. And then we also need to move away from special needs. They're not special needs, they're additional educational needs, and helping these children to realise their full potential in life. Rights of the child is also, oh, I'm finished, sorry.
Thank you.
And I'll hand over to my colleague, Emer.